Hello folks, Box here. I wanted to share with you a new character I've been working on, a Devouring Orb Autobomber Void Knight. The build is tanky as hell, utilizing a huge HP pool paired up with good damage mitigation. The build has great mobility, thanks to Healing Hands being used as a traversal skill. It's also pretty forgiving. As you get geared up, you reach over 4000 HP and a 60% endurance cap. The main strength of the build is running through echoes really quickly, and if you're playing in a group, it's a pretty good tank. It's cheap to gear compared to some of the other end game builds, making it a decent season starter. In group settings, it particularly appreciates classes that have crowd control ability or that can generate ward for him, like a Root Master. It's a great frontliner that can kill bosses somewhat easily, up to a certain point, by being mobile and having great sustainability with decent single target damage, thanks to Smite. Hope you enjoyed the video. Let's get into it. First off, I just wanted to say I tried a few versions of the build with different types of Devouring Orbs, and as much as I wanted to be original, it seems like the old Void Eruption build is pretty weak nowadays, especially compared to the Dark Moon nodes. The sustained damage can be okay with Eruptions. The problem is that it's much slower in monoliths and way weaker in arenas. As far as I can tell, there's really no upside for Void Eruptions, but they do look cool. I heard your feedback on my last video, and I'll go over each skill and passive points. Let's start by going over the passives real quick. You can follow the node allocation order on this video, but to explain quickly, the goal is to get Healing Hands and Sigils of Hope as quickly as possible. To do that, we allocate 15 points into the Paladin tree first, and once this is done, you can start speccing into the Void Knight tree passives. You could definitely spec into the Void Knight tree first, and then invest in the Paladin tree later, but I feel like you'd be getting Healing Hands and Sigils of Hope a bit late. In the end, it's really up to you. Now onto how to allocate your skill points. Let's begin with our main ability, Devouring Orb. I decided to go with the Dark Moon node first and rush straight for Cosmic Impact and Extinction in the bottom right. If you're struggling with mana, you could put points into Sightless Star, also the cast speed is nice. Then you can max out Riftcaller for more void penetration and slowly make your way towards the right side of the tree to get Chaotic Torrent. Then we have Healing Hands. I went straight for the movement ability. I think that's the most important. Then you can go immune while moving. It's always good, even in the campaign. You never know. Maybe you're gonna, maybe you get one tap. Then you want to go for mana efficiency as much as possible. So you're gonna max out all the mana efficiency nodes. You're only gonna take 2 in this one. Then I personally go 3 and 1. I saw some people go 4 and 0. I like the upfront healing personally. Then you're gonna pick up those 2 nodes which fear the undead and immobilize the void monsters. Now let's take a look at Smite. It's very simple. We're gonna simply take all of the nodes in the bottom right. I believe the best order to go would be 5 into Sacrifice as fast as possible. The raw damage is always amazing, for sure. And then we can take some points into Attunement to reduce that damage, especially when you're leveling up, you probably don't have a lot of leech. So you could max out first if you want. Then this node right here increases the flat crit chance but decreases the cast speed. So you could max that next. And then this node right here increases the crit multiplier. Now you basically don't have any crit chance when you're leveling up, so it's not really worth it to increase crit multiplier first. So I would max out all the other ones, and I experimented with the chance to blind. It also gives the bonus damage once they're blinded, so I figured that could be good. I don't think it's that worth it, to be honest, and I would just max out to reduce sacrifice health. And yeah, that's for Smite. Now for the Sigils of Hope, it really depends on how you're leveling up. If you're doing the campaign, I'd recommend not going for void skills right away. You can go for the damage per sigil node and the chance to cast on kill. You could also go for healing effectiveness while leveling. Once you get access to Devouring Orb, I would respec and go straight for the Convert to Void node. From there,
Get the chance to cast on kill node and work your way towards an extra sigil in the top right of the tree. And finally, the last spell is Anomaly. We remove the effect of sending the enemies forward in time and instead concentrate on getting buffs through the Time Bubble node. We cast the Time Bubble on ourselves with the Time Lord node, and inside the Time Bubble we gain cooldown recovery and tons of leech. Alright, let's dive into how to play this build. First off, you want to try to keep 4 sigils up at all times. You want to try to keep casting Devouring Orbs on cooldown to gain those purple orbs orbiting around you. Those orbs shoot out smaller purple projectiles and also explode on contact thanks to the Dark Moon node. To maximize DPS, simply spam Smite and Devouring Orb on a target. When smiting a monster in melee range, you gain Healing Hands, which increases your tankiness by quite a bit. Against tougher enemies, you can smite them from afar, gain some distance, and then cast some Devouring Orbs on yourself to gain some stacks, and then you reapproach. You can rush in with Healing Hands since you are invincible during the dash, but I like to keep it off cooldown if possible, just in case I might need to escape. Now onto the leveling. In the early game, like most people, I went Hammer Throw since Sentinel has very few decent options early on. I also made good use of Rebuke to clean out packs of melee mobs. It's a surprisingly effective method even if you don't spec into it. On this character, I skipped the campaign and started doing the monoliths at around level 17 once I reach the end of times. If this is your first character, I definitely don't recommend doing this. It ended up being kind of a hassle, backtracking to get waypoints for side quests and such. Unless you have a friend with all relevant waypoints ready to help you out efficiently, it's not really worth it. If you're gonna walk through the campaign, I would recommend sticking with Hammer Throw for a long time, getting your Paladin tree passives first to gain the Healing Hands and Sigils. We don't get Devouring Orbs until much later, around level 50, if you follow this guide's passive point allocations. You could realistically put points directly into the Void Tree at level 20, and then get Devouring Orb at level 35, but I prefer sticking with Hammer Throw at this level. If you decide to stick to Hammer Throw, look for plus throwing attack damage gear and anything else that would benefit your hammers like Strength or Dexterity. Now onto the itemization. One of the upsides of this build is that itemizing your character is very inexpensive, apart from the Ravenous Gloves. You should prioritize Vitality, as it scales both your HP and your damage with the Void Knight. Percentage health increase obviously scales fantastically well off your Vitality and raw HP. And to add another layer of defense, I personally maxed out my Endurance with the Anchor of Oblivion, but you could go a different route. To add more damage, you want to go Crit Chance, as this build does not have a lot passively. I like to aim for 20% cast speed, anything less is kinda clunky to me. Then you can add some spell damage and void damage to fill in the gaps. I'd recommend going for the Staff of Omnipotence and Titan Heart first, as both items synergize well together. The Staff is generally a good damage increase by itself, but paired up with the Titan Heart, it'll give you a good damage mitigation boost. The Ravenous Void Gloves push this build to the absolute next level in terms of tankiness. The added passive damage reduction, on top of the effect, basically gives you a second life. These gloves sell for a ridiculous amount on the market usually though. The rest of the items are mostly exalted, so you can find them randomly as you play the game. If you're buying some of the gear, I would recommend a nice Terra Crown helmet with plus 2 Devouring Orb, and maybe plus Vitality and Hybrid Help if you're lucky. I personally went with a Decayed Skull, since I had one lying around with 3 LP, and managed to craft something decent out of it. But I think a Terra Crown's probably better. For the first ring, I went with a nice 3 LP Siphon of Anguish. Those are pretty common and sell relatively cheap, so it shouldn't be a problem. For the second ring, I would recommend an Opal ring with good implicits if possible. Health and some damage would be nice. We used a belt to cap off our crit avoidance, paired with the blessing of Reign of Dragons. Once you have Ravenous Void, You really need Cleanse All Ailments on potion use on your belt to get rid of the self-inflicted debuff. This affix can be level 1, it really doesn't matter. A lot of people choose to seal this affix with the Glyph of Despair. For the first 4 blessings, the choices are pretty obvious. You could arguably go for void damage instead of crit chance, but I think crit is better. And for the last blessing, I would recommend capping off your lightning resistance if you need that. If you don't, you could get some mana. You don't really need it, but that's really all you can get here. Well, this concludes this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I have a few videos planned for the future. I'm working on my next build, which is going to be a true late game monster. I'm also planning on making a video on how to make gold in the market, what items are selling well, what strategies I've been using. Stay tuned.
Down or die.